Hi, everyone, and welcome to the last session of the day, a live presentation of the UX podcast with James Royal-Lawson and Per Axbom. I don't know if you ever listened to their podcast, but you should. They've been around since the start of UXLx almost, and recorded over 200 episodes. What episode are you on right now?
256 comes out tomorrow.
256. Okay. So you definitely should follow them and listen to all the back episodes. They're really insightful nuggets of information with very smart people. So with that said, I'll leave it to it. And welcome, James and Per.
And we'll start off with our traditional intro, even though it's the live UXLx Masters one. So you're listening to UX Podcast, coming to you from Stockholm, Sweden, helping the UX community explore ideas and share knowledge since 2011. We're your hosts, James Royal-Lawson.
And Per Axbom.
And right now, we're live to viewers, not just listeners, in 25 countries at UXLx Masters, from Spain to Sweden.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. It's not often that we actually have video when we record shows, but this is fantastic. James and I, of course, are in different locations. It's the pandemic after all. There's snow outside. Everybody keeps bragging about the temperature. It's not as cold here as it is in other places, but it's colder than it is in a lot of places. What was it again? It's
Derek in Ottawa was ridiculously cold in Canada, from what I've heard.
Oh, yeah,
but it's -9 here in Stockholm.
And Bruno was mentioning how long we've been going. What he did not mention is that we're celebrating 10 years this year. And we started out in Lisbon. That's our humble beginnings was at UXLx when James and I attended the conference, and on our way back from UXLx actually decided, shouldn't we start a podcast?
And we've actually,
10 years later, we're sitting here.
Yeah, I think we've been to most editions of UXLx. I think there's about 3 or 4 we missed.
Bruno has count.
There's lines on the wall.
And today, for you all, we had I'm going to say panel prepared, within quotation marks, because when we say prepared, we mean like real TV chefs. We have 3 people pre-recorded for you, but new and fresh, quite recent interviews from last week. And we have a topic for you as well. And the topic is design.
You want me to read it?
I'm just
giving you kind of like that pause.
I'm giving a pause and see if you jump on.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about the dilemma of rapid technological advancement and how many UXers express that they're being overwhelmed and worry about not knowing enough about the next thing, such as voice, chatbots, effective AI, blockchain, 5G, biometrics. I mean, the list just goes on forever. How do we feel more at ease with that UX knowledge that we already embody, while also addressing a perceived need to prepare for these future disruptions?
And we're going to be grounding the discussion in our observations. I think that a lot of people will are familiar about an industry-wide obsession with tools, often software tools. And we're looking to understand why tools are on everyone's mind and how this may or may not be a limiting factor as we are preparing to survive the demands of the future. So how is this going to work?
Well, we've got 3 brilliant UXLx masters lined up to talk to us. And those of you that are on top of the program will have noticed that these are Kim Goodwin, who is a UX legend and author of Designing for Digital Change. And when we've interviewed her in the past, I normally joke about the fact that if we could elect a leader for our design community, then I'd vote for Kim.
We do talk about that. And we have Kate Rutter, adjunct professor at California College of the Arts, and co-host of the much funnier than this podcast, What is Wrong with UX? And she's also the co-author of Build Better Products.
And then our third guest today is Pamela Pavliscak, who is going to be the closing keynote speaker tomorrow. Tech emotionographer, which is very difficult for me to say. And she teaches speculative design at Pratt Institute and is the author of Emotionally Intelligent Design.
So what is going to happen here today is that we're going to be playing 10-minute segments from interviews with Kim, Kate, and Pam. And each of these are parts of longer interviews, so they will be released as full-length episodes at a later date. And from the clips, you will hopefully pick up on how each individual approaches the topic from a unique perspective. So Kim is bringing the organizational perspective and touches on the hiring perspective as well.
And then Kate is going to be, she's going to be applying the education framework to this problem space.
And finally, Pamela is bringing it home by reminding us how we got here and what we can and cannot control when it comes to the future.
Yeah. So we're going to play these interviews one after each other, with just a quick reminder of the topic in between.
And in true UX podcast style, we will be summarizing and complementing all of this brilliance that you're going to be hearing with our own reflections based on the interviews at the very end of the show. And if you're lucky, there may be a joke or two.
Yeah, for those of you that do listen and listen to the very, very end of UX podcast episodes, you might be aware that me and Per have a awful tradition now of saying basically dad jokes at the end of each show. And they're terrible. They really are truly terrible.
So first out, we are bringing you Kim Goodwin. And we entered the interview as she is starting to reflect on the question of UX tools. And I just realized I forgot to share sound. So I'm going to share that screen again because I want to do it right so that you actually also can hear the sound that we're hearing.
Kind of crucial.
Yes. Share computer sound. That's the box I need to check.
And the tools will always change, right? I mean, a few years ago, Sketch was the thing. And now everybody's like, Figma's the cool new thing. And yeah, there's going to be something else in a couple of years. Sorry, Figma team. But there's always a new tool. There's always a new hotness. And, you know, the more senior you get, the less you even use tools. But other than, you know, PowerPoint and Excel. But I think that there's so much emphasis on both sides of the hiring equation on tools, right? I think that particularly more junior designers feel like they need to know either the tool or the product domain or the platform. And the hiring managers often, especially if they're less experienced hiring managers, tend to over-index on the tools that people know and the technologies, right? Oh, you must have 5 years designing this technology that's only existed for 2 years and using these tools. And that's not a great way to hire, right? Good hiring managers know that you hire for the core UX skills. And look, I think the great thing about UX is if you're actually doing UX and not just technology, what you're doing is you're helping your team or your client understand humans and make better decisions based on that understanding, right? That's really the heart of what UX is. And that has nothing to do with the tool or the technology. And I think that, you know, the more that you do it in different contexts, the more you see that that's true. So as long as you are good at doing that and at making ideas concrete in a way that your team can sort of look at and poke at and help you iterate, then those are really the things to focus on mastery of, because tools come along. But unfortunately, I think in hiring, you know, if you're out there trying to get a job, you might not be able to just say, oh, well, look, I can do anything. You actually have to show your hiring manager, who might not have that attitude that a seasoned hiring manager has. You have to show that you have transferable skills, and you have to show that you're good at learning new things quickly. That's one reason why I am often glad to see both consulting and in-house on someone's resume, for example, because in-house teaches you to build those long-term relationships. It teaches you how to actually learn through what you ship and how to get things built. Consulting teaches you how to present your ideas in compelling ways. It teaches you how to talk up the management ladder, and it teaches you how to learn new things quickly and apply what you've learned in one environment to another. And so I love seeing that blend of experience on somebody's resume.
So Kim, do you think that maybe is a practical way that we as UXers can fix or help fix the problem of hiring managers by maybe being both in-house and a consultant during our early careers? Because if there's inexperienced HR people and managers who are hiring do want the tools, that's difficult for us to fix.
Yeah. It is difficult for us to fix. And it's a thing that I find myself discussing when I coach hiring managers all the time about, they really need to hire for a fundamental skill profile and break down what does it mean to be good at user research? What does it mean to be good at conceptual design and detailed design? And really rate the tool skills very, very low on their priority list. So, I think that we can try to, we talk a lot about improving design education. We really need to improve design management education because I think there's a ton of room for growth there, because a lot of people who are new to design management are in environments where they don't have HR departments that really help them with some of those fundamental skills. And even a great HR department can't really help you break down the skills of what is inherent in design, right? They don't necessarily know that tools are not the thing because they don't have the design background. So yeah, I think we need to work on the design education, but we need to work on the other end of the hiring equation with helping people demonstrate their ability to learn, right? And demonstrate that, in this project, I got up to speed by doing these things and doing it quickly. And so showing situations where you've learned quickly and you've adapted to a new situation, showing how you have breadth in your portfolio and you've mastered similar things, and showing that you've done something comparable, I think is important. I will say one thing here, which is I think this is a bigger issue for women than it is for men sometimes, because a woman often will see a job ad that lists qualifications and think, they're not going to hire me because I don't fit the qualifications, right? Where lots of men I know are like, yeah, I fit 2/3 of those. I'm in, right? I think there's a confidence gap. I mean, yes, this is a broad generalization, and I know it doesn't fit everybody, but I think that those of us who have been raised to be maybe less confident in ourselves professionally need to be willing to say, well, I can do a lot of that. Let's assume the hiring manager is just engaging in some wishful thinking because I think I can do this job. And those of us who are on that side of the gender divide need to give that a shot too. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Would you even suggest that when you see something like that and you only feel like you fit 2/3 of the application, would you approach the company and tell them, I think I can provide this value? It may not be specifically what you asked for, but it will be valuable in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think that if you think you can do that job, why not? Because look, I think what a hiring manager wants is a lot like what a design stakeholder wants, right? They're stating a feature set, if you will, that they want. And really, they want someone to solve their problem. And you as a designer often will go in and say, yeah, I know you think you want this feature, but actually we can solve the user's problem better this way. You kind of have to do the same thing when you're applying for jobs, right? You sort of have to say, let me understand the problem you're trying to solve. Here's how I fit. And it's maybe not what you originally conceived of, but here's how I can fill that role. So unfortunately, sometimes when you're looking for roles, you have to be the one who's educating that hiring manager a bit. I mean, you can't approach it as educating them, right? Because it's not going to get you off on the right foot. But yeah, it may feel that way.
I think that is one of those underrated, or maybe underutilized skills that we do have. We're always meant to be focusing on the user and understanding it, but we talked about the fact that us as UXers, we don't always understand the developers' needs when we're working with them. And this is the same things like understanding the hiring manager's needs. So all the UX skills that we've all got, we seem to forget that it's reapplicable in other scenarios as well, not just the people on the other end of the digital interface we're working with.
Absolutely. I mean, the core of UX is how do you understand humans and use that to influence decisions and behavior, right? And that's a thing that we can do not just with our colleagues, but with our future colleagues when we're trying to get them to hire us for a consulting gig or or promote us into a new job or whatever it is we're looking for. We have to help them see the possibilities. And I think that anybody who's good at UX can be good at that if they approach the problem that way.
So the other end of this is, of course, that people assume that they need to know specific tools. But then there's also the new technology that is approaching and that is changing all the time. And people are feeling, amounts of stress over having to know voice and AI and chatbots. And how much do we need to know? How much of our time do we need to spend on understanding all these new technologies?
Yeah. Well, I think we need to understand that they exist and broadly what they make possible, right? So that in a project, we might be able to think, oh, I wonder if this is a thing we could use if it's not already something that exists in that team or that organization. But I don't think we need to know them in depth until we're actually working with them, right? We can't keep up with everything that we need to know. I think we can draw some comparisons to healthcare, right? In many cases in UX, we are playing the role of that generalist, that family physician, right? Where we need to know a little about a lot of things, but there are lots of things that we won't know in depth. And then there are some people who choose to specialize, right? You can go deep into being a voice AI designer and develop a ton of expertise there. And that's great. But not everyone needs to do that. And you don't have to have developed that expertise to do a bit of work in that field necessarily, right? You do need to learn some things about it. But many of those things that are specific to a technology, you can learn by observing some users use a technology, right? There are definitely principles involved in designing for a chatbot that are not there when you're designing for a form because the interaction is stepwise, it's slower, it's more time consuming. But all you have to do is run a couple of usability tests with a chatbot to see, oh, yeah, that's how it's different, right? It makes itself pretty clear pretty quickly. The other thing I will say about technology is, even though technology is new, everything old is new again sometimes, right? A lot of what is interesting and new about a technology sometimes is a constraint that has existed before. I remember a number of years ago, some designer who was much younger than I was saying something about, oh, well, designers your age don't really understand designing for phones and small screens and low resolution. And it was obnoxious of him to say, but I just had to laugh. I thought, okay, have you ever designed for 640 by 480 or monochrome or 16 color? Have you ever designed the screen on a glucose meter, which is monochrome and tiny? Yeah, small screens are really not a new thing. So, all of these constraints have come up before. Low bandwidth on some devices. Well, that existed many years ago. So everything old is new again.
Yeah, I mean, we're humans still, and the pace of human change, that's a little bit slow to evolve than the technology in front of us. So I guess it makes sense that we loop quicker.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some technologies that fundamentally change human behavior, right? I mean, even 20 years ago, we were all about trying to be more reachable. And now that we all have, supercomputers in our pockets, we're like, please, how can I be less reachable? Right? The behavior shift there is pretty profound, but few technologies do that quickly.
Awesome. That is the end of the segment with Kim. And I just love that story at the end. Did you know that one of my first websites that I designed in 1998 I made it. This footer said perfect for palm top computers because I was actually designing for mobile first because I was designing for the Palm device.
Oh yeah, yeah. And everyone had those little Palm devices in. Well, not everyone. I had a Scion. It's what I had attached to my belt and my waist back in the 90s.
If you're just joining us, we are playing 3 interviews recorded this past week on the topic of design confidence and surviving the demands of the future. And we have just heard from Kim Goodwin, and we'll now hand over to Kate Rutter. Let's see.
It's a good job. It's a good job we are pretending that we really are doing all of this live, because I noticed it. My balloon's fallen down. See, so you're watching the videos.
Fallen down.
Yeah, you're watching the videos.
Let's see if I chose the correct segment. Here we go. And here we go with Kate. And I did the same thing again. I don't know why Zoom doesn't have the default that you're sharing sound when you share. There we go. And here's Kate.
So, I get this, and it's so interesting because it reminds me of that frustration that often artists will hear, which is when someone sees their work, they might ask, how long did that take? So many artists, they consider that not necessarily a personal affront, but they roll their eyes. They're like, that's not the point. There was a lot of craft, experimentation, etc. I think it's a valid question. Somebody wants to understand what kind of scope and commitment that took. And I think it's a wonderful entry question. And when we shut down that entry question, then we don't get to those deeper questions that the artist might really ache for as a way to have somebody engaging with her art. So, in the same way, when I talk to early stage UX designers or people considering, they're curious, they want to know what tools they need to know. And it kind of is a specific tactical way for them to connect with what could this be like in my life, right? And yet we all know that it's not about the tools. In fact, the tools have become the most fluid and least persistent pieces of our craft, right? And so really it's about the ability to learn a new tool is a much more highly interesting, leverageable skill, but you get that by learning a bunch of skills and then kind of extrapolating and understanding kind of the meta or broader issues around those. So yes, it's frustrating because it's like software tools, they're not going to help, right? But it's the thinking that you use and how you apply those software tools that helps. And yet I think we need to look at that as an opening question and kind of the place and roles of tools in that work before we just try and shut it off and say it's not about the tools. Because tools are something that someone outside of a field of expertise can understand. And often foundational frameworks or concepts or these much more broader, specific, abstracted language are things that they can't connect with. And that it doesn't help us when we try and force those issues into somebody who's just entering a field and curious about it,
So when you're teaching students, and especially around the tools, how are you open and transparent about the reality that they'll face in the workplace after they've left with all these kind of shiny tools and understanding about it? I mean, do they understand the reality that's going to be meeting them?
Things are always mixed. I would say overall that the ones who feel most excited about starting their professional practice are the ones who are reading and listening and kind of connecting with the practitioners before they graduate. And so really looking both internally at their internal communities within the coursework or school or boot camp, whatever it is, and then also keeping a good eye on the outside world. And that, I think, that's the skill that certainly wasn't part of my growing up and my education, because, this idea of alumni was out there doing this other thing. But really now alumni can be, through your screen or in your earbud or wherever, because you can connect with material that they create, like you all are creating. So there's too much. We know that that's tricky, right? But if for folks who are listening, they are probably not hearing a lot about the tools. They're hearing about the challenges and the organizational dynamics and the cultural issues and the huge gap that we've had as far as serving and designing products with an ethical base. And so they're hopefully getting exposed to these broader issues so that it's not so much of a shock when you enter a real kind of real world environment.
I'm almost kicking myself now because that was so well put that actually, because that's a common reaction, I think, among seniors. Oh, you're talking about the tools. Please don't do that. It's about something else. Whereas you should see that really, truly as an opener. And I think there are probably many discussion points where we actually do that. We shut it down before we actually allow it to grow into something interesting.
Yeah, just thinking back, though, it's been a transition, and I think especially for structured education, so you have a school or you have a program, the shift from a tools practice into a more methods or even kind of applicable practice where you might have partner companies that are creating design challenges within the context of a studio or even a classroom. I think that is an evolution. And it takes a while for people's expectations to change, for the material that you use to communicate about the program to change, etc. And so it can take a few years before you stop listing, this is the set of software you need, right? It's a little bit like implying that someone might go to UC Berkeley, but what they want to know is the full book list of everything they'll take when they're there. It's like, well, that really has a lot of other considerations, and we might recognize that that's kind of an unhelpful question to ask, but I don't think the world has kind of gotten to the understanding that software tools are less helpful. That said, it's the means of production, right? If you cannot use Figma, there are certain workplaces that you cannot participate in. And so it is tricky. And for people who don't have, we're talking a lot about tools, but for people who don't have access to those because of price, because of computing equipment, because of just even location or global situation, whatever that is, then they're at a disadvantage. And so the tools are important. Not being able, you can use the tools well and still not be able to design well, I think. So I think we're trying to figure that out too. But I'm more interested in how do people stay on top of what is happening and coming next, especially when they're either inculcated into an education program or worse yet in a company where, your challenges are almost always here and now, and very immediate. And I think it's the lifelong learning, which I talked about at UX Lisbon a couple of years ago, is the only way that our field will, and the practitioners in it will have a sense of renewal and self-renewal, skills renewal, but also opportunity renewal that will then fuel our organizations to have the same. I don't think our companies are going to be like, we got to go out and chart a new course. Like, that maybe some of them like R&D, maybe, I'd love that world, but that world's not happening. We need the people within those organizations to be pioneering what they believe is coming next.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked previously about continuous learning, but I wonder if something just as important maybe is continuous confidence. Because the way that we've got these tools and the tools change, but there's a set that you kind of need to experience anyway. And I guess that confidence about the fact you have got experience with the tools is maybe what we need to look at too.
I love that continuous confidence and that you're building and kind of constantly creating that sense of comfort and awareness and capability for yourself. And I might add to that this continuous exploration. And, I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but I'm going to because it's a thinky topic and we need to explore it from multiple perspectives. So for every time I say it's not about the tools, I will also say new tools give new opportunities. There are things that you can do. Sometimes it's just making it more efficient. So if you go from I'm not going to call names, but Photoshop to Sketch, some of the same principles apply, right? Sketch is better at it than Photoshop for certain things. Photoshop is actually still better at it than Sketch is, but they, they kind of fit into the same mindset. If you go from Microsoft Word to Google Docs, then whatever. Like you're learning the new orientation, but you're not really learning the new mindset. But if you go from something like Figma to like React, that is a whole different thing in your brain, right? And so I think that's where new and interesting things happen. And so I used to joke last year with some of the colleagues in the East Bay
working in any
UX scene, and we were concerned about falling out of tools. Like, I've got tools I'm so efficient with. Like, it is not interesting for me to explore a new tool if I am on production or if I'm on deadline. But I also know that those tools, like, at some point I'm going to be clinging to, my desktop versions with my dead hand. So I gotta stay fresh. But it's a little embarrassing, as if someone believes you're in a seasoned position, to ask for help with a tool that everybody else knows. So I get concerned about our senior managers or leaders who are no longer perhaps in the day-to-day enough that they get efficient with the new tools, not understanding the capabilities of the new tools, and so they can't effectively kind of make the most of their team. And that's something that I think about. So I almost wanted like a secret speakeasy. We're going to call it a teach easy, where you'd go and get a drink, and then, folks who knew those tools would come in, and clandestine on the down low would like teach you how to use that shit, so that you didn't miss an opportunity because you didn't know it.
That's one of the downsides of not knowing what sheets you've edited out. I wasn't quite expecting Kate to finish exactly there. Well, we're going to move straight into our third guest and interview for this special episode. And we talk to Pam. And now Pam, this took a bit of effort to get the interview done, because there was New York got covered in snow, and she had a power cut for a couple of days during our attempts to line this interview. But eventually we got the power back up for her, and she joined us, and she now shares some real truth bombs about the future and our past.
We're working in any kind of tech, we're always in that struggle of, okay, how much do we have to know a little bit about everything? How much do we specialize? I guess I'm coming at this from the perspective is I've been working in tech for quite a while, and I remember when UX wasn't even a thing, and we just made that up completely, and now I'm teaching at a design school part of the time, and there's all these things that I sit back and say, oh wow, we actually made some big moves over the past decade, maybe even 15 years. We know some stuff now, but there's a lot of stuff we don't know. And of course, those are the classes I teach: speculative design and effective computing. And so that sometimes throws students for a loop, because they are like, wait a second, you're asking me to let go of the side of the pool a little bit here and explore and expand what we're doing and get creative. And to me, that's the fun part. So I don't know if we have to be excellent at every single type of technology and everything that's out there, but I think we have to keep our curiosity for that, and be less fearful of trying out new things. I think there's a tendency right now where we're very much in the profession trying to define, well, I do this, but not this, or I do this, but not this. And, you have to be realistic with what you can do in your jobs, of course. I don't think that shuts out this idea of being curious and always trying to learn new things and try out new things. And I hope that in most roles we'll have a little bit of space for that, because it brings a lot to whatever it is that we do.
I love what you're saying about how UX is something we invented, because students tend to forget this,
Yeah.
that all the things we teach are things we invented.
Yeah.
And so looking forward, we have to acknowledge that we can choose to think that, oh, somebody has to teach me this, or we can choose to think, I can invent the future by myself.
Yeah. And I think there's that tension right now, and maybe we're feeling it really strongly, and especially young people coming into the profession are feeling it. What is it that I should know, that we already know, that is standard practice, that it's going to be expected of me? What is changing? What can I explore? What can I kind of get creative with and stretch a little bit? And I think it's important to have that balance of both of those things. When we're thinking about the future, we want to feel that we have some agency, that there's a lot of possibilities, that there's not just one road. I think that's really hard right now, because when you look at a lot of the future technologies, like, I think pre-pandemic, we were worried a lot about, are the robots going to take our jobs? And I think, in my specialization, which is emotional AI and affective computing, there's a worry, a very visceral reaction to that of privacy and making this interiority external, and what the implications are of that. So we have to kind of get over the fear to have real conversations about this and try out things, because there's just not one way any of these new technologies have to be, right? There's a way that they are now, and a lot of times we're not getting a lot of exposure to those. So I can speak mostly to like the affective computing realm. There's innovation. There's not much application. A lot of people aren't seeing that in their everyday workflows. I think that will probably change over the next few years, especially since a lot of the health biometrics are very similar to the emotion biometrics. And so the sensors that you're using to track like your temperature, your pulse, or things that might become more ubiquitous may also be used for this emotional piece. And those are big questions. Like, we can't just say like, no, yuck, I don't want that. That's scary. Or, oh, there's ethical conundrums. Of course there is. But our job is even bigger than that, is to figure out, well, is there stuff here that will contribute to our well-being, that will make people have closer relationships, will develop sort of a culture of care or kindness? I think there's a lot in there to unpack and explore. And so I think that's another thing that we have to get over, is kind of that fear of, okay, this isn't very appealing to me at the offset, but there's something in here that maybe can spark a new idea, or that I need to know about. So I think that adds another layer, right? Because we've already talked about like, well, here are the things you have to know, or this is my job, and this is another kind of job, or this is my specialty, this is another one. But then there's this kind of like the fear factor of, I don't like this kind of thing, or I don't want to learn about this sort of thing. And I think that's a big hurdle to get past as well.
Do you think that are we still a little bit too focused on the visual aspect of design in where we are today? When I listen to what you're saying about what you see as coming towards us and the type of thing we're going to get involved in, that to me feels, it's not just, a lot of that's not just the visual aspect.
I hope so. I mean, I think that's a real limitation of where we're at right now, is we're very focused on visual design, and in a kind of weird way too, because we also shy away from like specifics about visual design in a lot of ways and focus on the structure. So that's kind of a weird tension to think about, but let's just set that aside. I would like it to be more multi-sensory, right? Because when we think about our emotional lives, that's not just like we can see facial expressions, right? Or we can pick up on the way somebody moves or a gesture. But there's a lot more to our emotional life. I mean, a lot of it's just interior, a lot of it's cognitive. a lot of it is sensorial, though, how things touch, the taste, music. And I think we don't have a good way to design with those materials yet. I think that's coming, and that's why my most exciting work, I think, now is really experimenting with objects, with things, with physical. Usually they have, a screen that goes with them and they're somewhere in the mix. But I think that's a new territory for us, and that's really exciting. And it's not that people haven't been thinking about it over the years. It just feels like it's slower in coming. And maybe that's a good thing, right? Because sometimes we think, oh, things are changing so fast. I got to know this, I got to know that. But then you look back on it and you think, well, it's really been like, 20 years since people got excited about ubiquitous computing. And where is it? I can't taste, or VR would be another one, right? There's lots of possibilities there, but it's not like we have to scramble that it's being implemented everywhere. We have time to think this through and play out different possibilities and get a little bit experimental with that, because it's not going to be embedded in everything right away.
I love how hopeful this makes me feel, because going into this, what we were talking about is technology is moving so fast. We need to keep up.
Yeah.
It's so fast paced. But when you said that about, well, it's actually not moving that fast, and we have time, it made me think about Bill Gates, and he started talking about voice control interfaces in the late 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, I still curse at Siri every day because it's so bad.
Oh, absolutely. Who doesn't? And plus, that's one of the beautiful things about being human, is we want to kind of stick it to the technology and show how we're better than it in various ways. And that can help the technology get better too, by all the ways that we try to prank it. But I don't think that will ever go away. That's a very human impulse. So.
Yeah, we said that whole thing where we're kind of like playing with the ideas, talking about the ideas that the next generation of designers will actually do the nitty-gritty of working with.
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe even the next generation after that. Again, I feel like that's going to be something that, next generation of designers isn't going to get slammed with a bunch of stuff. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of work with artificial intelligence in various ways, but there are so many different flavors and aspects of that I think it won't be like, oh, geez, we're going to have to solve AI in this next generation. I think it will. I'm betting it's going to be slower than that, because if you look at the evolution of even just our field so far, not all of technology, it's been 20 years or so, maybe. It's a little bit longer than I've been in it, but yeah, it's quite a while that it's come to this point where we even just have organizations all doing usability testing. Not even all of them, So
very true.
Think about stuff like that, and then you think, well, so I think the best skill that we can give for current designers and the new ones coming along, though, is this feeling of agency, that they can make a change and that it's not going to pass them by. And, I mean, that's more of a cultural mythology, though, don't you think? Where it's like, when you're a kid, people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? The fact is, most people aren't going to be one thing. They're going to be lots of different things. And they might be vastly unrelated things. There are very few people who start off in one path and end up in that path. There are a few, certainly. I mean, some people have like a calling or a real, draw towards something. But I think if you ask people in our field, but in other fields too, where did they start out? Or if you look at their career over a larger chunk of time, there's a lot of ways it evolves and changes. So I think that may be something we have to kind of keep in the background too. Is like, yeah, our field's going to change a lot. And personally, you're going to change a lot and want to do different things and explore. So maybe after you pay off your grad student loans and stuff.
Oh, that ending is fantastic as well, because it's about future and curiosity and all these amazing things we can do. But then it's like, and then there's real life, and then you have debt.
Yeah. But I was hoping that these chats would be reassuring. Because the question we started all these with was that kind of like, oh God, it's all about tools. And me and you, Per, we hear from students a lot about tools, and junior UXs about what tools do we need to have, learn, and so on. And I think Kim, Kate, and Pam all did a pretty good job of reassuring us or me about that. The tools, yeah, they're important. We need to work with them, but that the methods that underpin them, the underlying skills we have as designers, are of course what we cherish and hold dear.
Yeah, completely agree. And there's one core message there actually that I took to heart so much, is that it's so easy to be a grumpy old man and complain about things. Because I think that's kind of how this topic started as well. And that sense of, if someone is excited about something, I don't tell them they're wrong. I don't tell them there's another way. If someone is excited about something, I help them turn that excitement towards something that is valuable. So if someone is excited about a tool, I ask them why. And they could say, well, I want to build this thing. I want to build this app for people who are blind. And what do you want the app to do? When they tell me, and it's like, okay, so how do you know what they want? I'm not sure. Well, how would you find that out? And they're like, oh, well, I could go interview them. And so all of a sudden I took that excitement for the tool into wanting to do user research.
Yes, exactly. Because what you did there, though, was that thing of applying your UX skills
exactly
to that initial enthusiasm and suggestion, or topic about the tools itself. And like Kim said as well about taking our UX skills and applying that to applying for jobs. So rather than just seeing the list of requirements for a job and, like you said, kind of going, oh no, that's not me. Kind of trying to see through those requirements, just like we would in any project. Say, okay, they're asking for this, but what's really behind that? You just ask your questions there. What's making them ask these questions? Why are they demanding Figma? Why are they demanding this? And putting yourself in a better position to succeed in getting that job.
Right. And then you don't tell them, you actually use their energy, and they find out themselves what they already know that they should be doing. And that's how they actually get the incentive to do it as well.
I mean, it is, oh God, what do you want to be when you grow up? We joke.
Yeah,
I think me and you joked about that
an
awful lot, because it is one of those questions that never goes away. And I think, the three we've just talked to now, and me and you, we've been in the branch for a fair time now, and I think there's a degree of fear that even as senior UXers or designers have about the new things, and the fear of kind of like, oh God, well, I don't know anything about these new tools. And I think, there I'd like us to work more as senior UXers with the junior ones to transfer that knowledge, or transfer that kind of, be more at ease and transfer the kind of methods we've gathered around it, instead of being worried that we don't know how to use some of these shiny new tools that are on the way through.
And also think more about, so maybe you don't know anything about the tool, but what would you like the tool to do? And be more proactive about the things that Pam was talking about, promoting well-being and relationships and the culture of care, and realizing, so why are we doing this? Oh, there I am again with the why. It's like, always keep asking that. And when you do, stuff happens. You realize things.
Yeah. Well, that you're being curious, and you're staying curious. So what was it? Transferable skills we mentioned, learning new skills quickly, and keeping curious. But I guess everybody that's listening and watching now and being at UXLx Masters, then obviously they are curious. Either that, or they've got a really good budget at their jobs to pay for these kind of things. It works too.
And they have to go back home and demonstrate an ability to learn.
Present to their teams. I don't know, but I mean, is it possible for us to take questions or do anything like that
I mean, if we're running over time as always, but that's only fun. I mean, and we're closing up the episode, but it would be fun to actually, if someone has a question, that would be actually really fun. I wouldn't mind, and then we can do sort of the music, and then we can do 1 or 2 dad jokes because we need to do those.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do at least 1 or 2 of those.
I mean, if anyone writes a question, I'm not going to ignore it. The future is multi-sensory. We talk about that a lot, don't we, as well? That we expect things to be more music and sound, or even taste and touch, and because we're sort of tired with the flat screens, I think, and that's why we talk about it a lot. But I really take to heart this thing about multi-sensory. And I wasn't going to mention this, but I mean, I have played around with the new app, the Clubhouse, and just that experience of sound and speaking to people via sound, it's so completely different from everything else I'm trying out. And that just that difference in the sensory experience makes a whole lot of difference to me.
I was wondering if you were going to go with the whole Clubhouse thing.
Couldn't resist.
And I'm trying really hard to refrain from whinging about it like the grumpy old man. I'm excluded from Clubhouse because I've not got an iPhone. I've got an Android phone, so I'm excluded by design. So I can't take part in all these things, these auditory conversations that you're having on Clubhouse now.
And that's just a good point. Also, what Kate was saying about when we talk about the tools, and we acknowledge that there are so many people who can't even use the tools because they can't afford them, then it's actually, we're promoting inequality if we're making it about the tools rather than the process and how we work. Yeah.
You're right. More inequality and more division, more exclusive design instead of inclusive design that we weave into how we work.
Let's start wrapping up. If we see questions, we'll still take them. Want to say a huge thanks, of course, to Kim, Kate, and Pam for doing this with us, and with quite short notice, setting up all these interviews that we recorded just last week, and actually on Monday when it came to Pam because of the snowstorm. And of course, be sure to subscribe to UX Podcast to be notified when the full version of each episode is released as well.
Yep, and thank you to Bruno and UX Lisbon team for inviting us to be part of this. And this conference, as you know, Bruno, means a lot to us. Symbolizes the beginning of our show. So if you want something else to listen to after this, then recommended listening would be to go back to episode 1 from 10 years ago and see what we thought of that edition of UXLx.
Yes, awesome.
Do you want to do a joke, Per?
James.
Okay, Per.
Why did the Scarecrow win an award?
I don't know, Per. Why did the Scarecrow win an award?
Because he was outstanding in his field.
Oh. No, it's really, really awful. Oh.
One more.
Oh, you've got another one?
You have one for me?
Well, yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So, right, the past, the present, and the future, they walked into a bar.
Okay, and what happened?
It was tense.
That took me a while, though.
It took you a while.
Why did the Invisible Man turn down the job offer?
I don't know, but why did the Invisible Man turn down the job offer?
He just couldn't see himself doing it.
Oh. So I 3 is more than enough. There's going to be no one left by this point.
Over to Bruno.
Yeah, over to Bruno.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. It was great discussing these issues again, and for those attendees that joined us, don't forget to subscribe to Paris Podcast and do the same thing as I do. Listen it on the way home because they're always very interesting. Okay, so thank you, James and Per, and that's a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a good day tomorrow.
Bye.